Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Flash Season 8 review series. And today I am going to be talking about episode 15, Into the Steel Force, which I have just finished watching. And quite honestly, I am very proud to say that this episode was actually really good. I really enjoyed this one a lot. And for the first time in quite some time, it actually felt like The Flash. It didn't feel like The Flash in a supporting role or relegated to the background. This was all Flash, the fastest man alive, the Scarlet Speedster, Barry Allen. This was absolutely brilliant and one of the best episodes in quite some time, I must say, because I've said in past reviews that I've really got annoyed and fed up of the Flash taking a backseat to his own show, and to the point where he's almost relegated to background supporting status. Haven't really been a fan of that, but this episode came through and it was really good. Flash was in the lead, doing his thing, thoroughly enjoyed it. Aside from the whole Allegra and Chester thing that they're trying to force upon us, which I've got nothing against those two characters, but it just feels really, really weird. But apart from that, this episode was absolutely brilliant and certainly made up for the last two episodes, especially episode 14, which, quite frankly, I didn't dislike it, but I didn't love it either. It was kind of a hit and miss for me. I'm really glad that the show came through with this one and delivered a top-notch episode. There wasn't really a lot of action in the traditional sense. There was still some action to a point, but this was mainly Barry Allen in the lead, showcased to the fullest, I might add, using his brain, trying to use his wits to try and figure out the disappearance of Iris, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I liked it. I really liked it. And as I said, this felt like a Flash episode. And season 8, apart from the Armageddon 5-part special and a couple of other episodes, I haven't really been enjoying season 8 that much. I wouldn't say it's been terrible, but I know it can be better. So I'm hoping with this episode we're going to start getting on back to the path of being a good show again. And if we can continue to have episodes as good as this, then we could be on our way back to having a good season, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a quick recap of what's happened, and then we're going to get straight into episode 15, which, by the way, as I said before, was really good. I really enjoyed this one a lot. And as I said, one of the best episodes in quite some time. So, as we saw previously, we saw Frost take on Deathstorm and defeat him by absorbing all of his energy into her own body. But as a result of her actions, this caused her to eventually pass away due to not being able to contain Deathstorm's powers. And as we saw in episode 14, most of Team Flash were trying to cope with the aftermath and the loss of their fallen friend, and everybody had taken it really badly, none more so than Caitlin. And over the course of that episode, we saw all members of Team Flash trying to find ways to pay tribute to Frost, with Barry Allen writing a checklist of things that Frost would have liked. And we also saw a funeral held for Frost, with everybody paying tribute, with Caitlin delivering a touching eulogy for her sister. And as I said, that episode was kind of a hit and miss for me. Wasn't the greatest, but wasn't the worst either. I had very high expectations for that episode. I was hoping we would see some cameos from old characters like Wally West, Harrison Wells, maybe even Cisco, but we didn't get that. And at the very end of that episode, we saw Caitlin meet up with Mark and pretty much tells him that I'm going to find a way to bring my sister back. And that was how we ended episode 14. So this episode pretty much picks up where we left off from the end of episode 14. And as I said, this was actually really good. It actually felt like a Flash episode. Really enjoyed this one a lot. So with that all said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about episode 15, Into the Steel Force. So this episode picks up where we left off at the end of episode 14, where we saw Iris disappear from her office, and Barry discovers that Iris is missing when he goes to bring her breakfast at work. We then see Barry go into full-on crisis mode and alerts the team that Iris is missing, and perhaps just as troubling, Dion is not responding for calls for assistance as well, as we see Barry races around Central City trying to figure out how they can locate Iris, and we see Cecile mentions the incident with Tinya in Coast City, and we see at her apartment, Caitlin explains that she has a plan to bring Frost back by essentially making a clone of herself. However, Mark isn't fully on board with this and leaves in a huff. Barry runs to Coast City to speak with Tinya, but not only does she refuse to help him, she seems glad that Iris is missing, still clearly upset about what happened to her mum Renee after Iris made her disappear. She leaves Barry, but Dion suddenly shows up and confirms that Iris is still in the Steel Force, but he needs Barry's help to find her. Dion doesn't seem to be doing especially well himself, as he explains that he has also been infected with Iris's time sickness. When told about the plan for Barry to help Dion locate Iris within the Steel Force, Joe isn't fully on board and says to Barry that something doesn't feel right, and is he sure that Dion can be trusted. Barry dismisses Joe's concerns and is only concerned about finding Iris. Meanwhile, Chester gets to work on something that will help him look for Iris within the Steel Force and receives a phone call from Kramer. They found a device at the scene of an explosion and need his assistance in identifying it. When Chester goes to look at the device, he's horrified to realize that it is his own design, but he doesn't tell Kramer this. Instead, he is asked to examine the device back at the lab. Dion warns Barry that they are going in the Steel Force, which is a very weird place, and they are off there. When they find that the place is not doing very well, with time loops going back and forth, with the past and the present and the future all existing all at once. As they go deeper into the things looking for Iris, Barry encounters Renee as she's trapped there, but instead of letting Barry stop and help her, Dion presses him on to locate Iris. They both find Iris's tracking particle, but not Iris herself, and then we see Dion double-crosses Barry by taking that particle for himself and abandoning him there, leaving Barry with no way out. We then see, in 2049, Barry's daughter Nora is working on an article that she's writing when Dion finds her and then takes her into the Steel Force, where she finds Barry. Seemingly trapped in the Steel Force's approximation of the West House, Nora tells her dad that in the future she follows Iris's footsteps to become a reporter, and ends up giving him a pep talk, much the way Iris has given Barry pep talks in the past. However, I feel this pep talk has much more meaning to it. They then realise that Barry is actually still connected to the Steel Force itself, and he can use that to get them home. After a little bit of meditation, thanks to Wally West, who has taught him how to meditate, Barry is able to see all the timelines at once. Connected to the Steel Force and knowing what he needs to do, Barry and Iris go to make their way out. They fail their first try before realising that they have to make their jump while was phasing. They are eventually successful and return to Star Labs in the present. Barry also tells the team that he knows Iris is okay in the Steel Force. They just need to find her and help her and bring her back. Meanwhile, Chester is still very upset about what's happened with designs, and after getting his own pep talk from Allegra, he realises that his efforts to share knowledge is actually a good thing, and gets to the heart of what's really happened. Turns out the explosion was an accident when someone used his design to help try and give a group home free unlimited energy. Chester ends up offering himself as a mentor to those trying to further their own designs and efforts. As the episode is start to be brought to a close, Chester and Allegra leave his lab, and something hacks into Chester's computer remotely and downloads all of his files. Now, this was quite an interesting scene because when this happened, at the same time, which goes into the next scene, which is kind of like a mid post credit scene, we see Caitlin in her apartment. So I wondered if Caitlin somehow got the information from Chester's computer or not, but I'm sure we will find out. But it just seems a bit of a coincidence. You had that scene and it's straight into Caitlin's apartment. So weird, but as I said, we'll probably find out in the next episode. We then see Mark ends up back at Caitlin's apartment, and after thinking over everything she said to him about getting Frost back, he's decided he's in to help as long as Caitlin promises him one thing, that they won't fail. And Caitlin says, I promise we won't fail. And that's how we end episode 15. Like I said, aside from the whole Chester and Allegra thing, which to me is just weird and feels forced, I absolutely loved this episode. This was one of the best episodes I've seen in quite some time. Big improvements from the last episode, which, as I said, was a hit and miss for me. All Barry Allen. Barry Allen doing his thing, trying to find Iris. The whole Nora making an appearance, I actually didn't mind that. She had a small, modulated role, so she didn't overshadow Barry too much. So that was cool. So she had like a small part to play, but it was all Barry Allen in the Still Force trying to locate Iris. And I like the little reference to Zoom and Godspeed teaming up. I know it was only time going wrong, but it's quite interesting writing there. So you never know. We could see Zoom and Godspeed team up in a future episode. I personally would like to see that, just to see Zoom again. But by and large, I really enjoyed this one a lot. This was one of the best episodes of season 8 in quite some time. Huge improvements from the last one. And like I said at the beginning, if we continue to get episodes like this, then we could be on our way to having a good solid season. I want to see more of Barry Allen in the lead, doing what he does best, and that's being the Flash. This is the Flash's show. We lived up to that reputation and name in this episode. Let's hope it continues. And the whole thing with Caitlin trying to resurrect Frost, I'm curious to see how that's going to play out, because I don't know really, because Frost getting killed off, it was shocking, but as I said in a previous review, it didn't really do much for me. I just felt like it was kind of forced. So if they are planning to bring her back, hopefully they'll do it in a cool way. No pun intended. So I'm curious to see how this is all going to play out in the next episode. So that's going to be it from me. I am going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on episode 15? Did you enjoy it? What was your thoughts on Barry Allen trapped in the Still Force? Did you enjoy it? What was your thoughts on Nora West Allen's role in this episode? Do you think it was a good role? Do you think there wasn't too much of her? And do you think it was fine for what it was? And also, what do you think that was that hacked into Chester's computer? Who do you think that was? Do you think it was Caitlin, or do you think it was someone completely different? And also, how do you think Caitlin is going to bring Frost back? Could it be through cloning, or do you think they're going to actually dig up Frost's body and just resurrect her the old-fashioned way? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Flash Season 8 review series, where I am going to be talking about episode 16, which I am very much looking forward to talking about, especially with the way this episode played out, and I'm really curious to see how everything is going to unfold here. So hopefully it will be a good one. So until next time, take care everybody and stay safe, and once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.